Here we go. Exercise 3E, operations with decimals. Now, questions are in OneNote. When we say operations, you need to know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So you found that you would have done that for 3B with fractions. Now in 3E, you're doing that with decimals. Now most students in my past experiences, they can add and subtract. That's probably the general skill that almost anyone in the population can do. What I find that students tend to struggle is when it comes to multiplication and division. One, it's because times tables are poor. Two, division is the harder version of multiplication. So the better your multiplication, the better it is. So here, I've done an example, a video of how I do plus and minus, but I'm assuming most of you should be able to add and subtract. Where you're finding difficulty, that's why my video example is there. Today's session, I'm actually going to focus more so on the skill of multiplying decimals. Okay, so I've got multiplying and then dividing decimals. I'm going to show you both these examples. I'm going to show you about 3 in total, and then I'll give you that time to either work on 3C, 3D, or if you're up to date, 3E. Okay, so I try to give you as much time as I can in a classroom so you have less to do at home. Be efficient. The more you waste here, then the more you have to do at home. That's just how it works, right? And don't forget, tomorrow's session, Thursdays, is your catch-up session as well. And mind you, in this term, I haven't seen all students utilize Thursdays as productively. Okay, so that's on you. I give it to you, you utilize that how you want. I can only encourage you. Yeah? Here we go. So I'm going to start recording this part here, and I want you to copy 2 examples down for multiplication. We're going to start off with B, question. So write down the question, 4.135 times 3. And then we're going to do one where you have 2 digits. So let's do F. Actually, I'll do E. E looks a bit scary for some. I'll do E as well. All right. The first example, I chose B, and then I chose E. Notice because both of them have decimals. So you got 2 decimals for E. Most students will find it tricky when you have 2 decimals. Whilst in B, there was only 1 number with a decimal. So most students will find if you only have 1 number as a decimal and the other one's a whole number, it's easier to do, right? So here we go. This is how I want you to lay out your method. We're going to treat 4.135 as if it was a whole number and there was no decimal points. So you'd write 4,135 multiplied to 3, which is 3 units. Okay, that's where we're going to start off. I'm going to move this down a bit. Here we go. So multiplying decimals, I want you to treat them like whole numbers first. We deal with the decimals later. Okay? This is how we would do it. So just like what you learned back in year 7 and primary school, how do you do long multiplication? This essentially says, remember how I talked about place values? 4 is the 4,000s, 1 is in the hundreds column, 3 is in the tens column, 5 is in the units column. When you say times 3, what you're actually doing is you're doing 3 groups of every column. 3 groups of the 5 units, 3 groups of the 3 tens column, 3 groups of the 100s column, and 3 groups of the thousands column. That's what you're doing. That's why the technique works in the idea where you say, what's 3 groups of 5? Now 3 times 5, what is that? 15. Now 15, we understand that it's 15 units. But the reason why we only write the 5 and not the 1 is because based on our metric system, we know that 10 units is equivalent to 1 tenth. That's why instead of writing the 1 in the units column, we write the 1 in the tens column. Because we know 15 is made up of 10 plus 5, but that's the same thing as saying 1 tenth. That's why you move that 1 into the tens column. Okay, it's not magic, it's logical. 15 units is equivalent to 1 tenth and 5 units. That's why we do that. So, when you're doing your multiplication, you're doing 3 times 5 is 15, 5 units, and 1 tenth. You carry the 1 across to the tens column. And then we do the next thing. We say, all right, well, I need now 3 groups of the tens column. So 3 groups of 3 tells me I'm doing 3 groups of 30 units. That's what you're really doing, or 3 groups of 3 tens. So 3 times 3, what's 3 groups of 3? 9. But remember, that's 9 tens with an extra tens that we had from our previous exercise, or the number. Right? So in the previous column, we had an extra 1. So 9 plus the 1 gives me 10 tens. But 10 tens is equivalent to what? 100s. That's why you put the 0 and you say, I've got 1 more hundreds. And you put it into the hundreds column. Then you do the same thing again. 3 groups of the 1, and that's in the hundreds column. So 3 times the 1 is 3, plus the 1 gives you now 4. And then finally, 3 groups of your thousands column. 3 times 4 is 12. That's why 12 of those thousands, we know that's equivalent to 10 and 2. This 10 can be written as 1 of the 10,000s. That's why you can see it's 1 in the 10,000s, 2 in the thousands column, 4 in the hundreds, 0 in the tens, and 5 in the units. Okay, it's all about place values. If you understand why it works, that's why it works. Okay, now it feels like we're done. We've got 12,405. So how do we finish off the answer?
You add the 3 decimals to the decimal point.
Okay, so you said 3 decimal points. Where do I add the decimal points? Is it 1, 2, 3?
Other way.
Why is it the other way?
Multiplication.
Because you had 3 before, so you have 3 now.
3 to 4. Ah, because you're adding this. Is that what you're saying? Yeah? Okay, so this is a very good point. Now, what I want you to see is exactly what James is describing. See, when we did our multiplication, we did 4,135 times 3. That wasn't true. That wasn't our problem. The problem was 4.135. But how did I get 4,135? I had to multiply this by 1,000. Okay? So if I multiply it by 1,000 to make my life easier, then your final answer, you have to then go backwards and divide it by 1,000. So in this step here, when you take 12,405 and you say divide 1,000, that's what James was saying, that you can actually just write it as moving the decimal point 3 places back, and your final answer should then be 12.405. Okay, so if you had to times 1,000 up here, then that means to go back in the answer, your final answer, you have to make sure to do the reverse, which is divide 1,000. That's why we move back 1, 2, 3. Now, where's the 3? It's the zeros. It's a number of multiple of 10s. 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. That's why you're moving 3 place values back. Okay? So that's all to do with, that was all to do with place values. So I'm going to go back here. That's how you do B. So that practices your long multiplication with whole numbers. Now, using the same theory, we're going to do the same for the next part. Here we go. Let's copy this one down. So if you can do E, technically you can do the others by yourself as well. Let's have a look at E. You see, we don't like it when we're doing 0.0023 times 8.1. It's too confusing. What we'd like is we had whole numbers. Now let's think about it. 0.0023, how much would I need to multiply in terms of place values to get it to a whole number of 23? Not 3 times? Sorry? Interactive textbook. 100. 100. How many groups of 10 is that? 100. How many groups of 10? 10, right? So this can be broken up into 10 groups of 10. But you can see each group you only move twice. There's only every group of 10 you only move 1 decimal place. So if you move twice, you only get to 0.23. You need 1,000. Okay, so 1,000 now has 3 zeros, which means you only move it 3 times. So it's now 2.3. But I want 23. How do I get 23? 10,000. See, 10,000 has 4 zeros. That tells you move 4 spaces. Very good. So that gives you 23. Okay, so be careful there. What about 8.1? How many spaces do I need to move to get to 81? 10, very good. One group of 10, that's all I need. So times it by 10. So I get another 10. So how many 10s have I moved in total? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in total to make all of this whole numbers. Okay? That's going to be key. So for you to get whole numbers, to get 23, I needed to multiply this by 4 10s. To get this to 81, I needed to times it by 1 10s. That's going to be key for the ending result. Okay, so here we go. Now we're going to write our calculations. We're going to do 23 times 81. We're going to treat it like whole numbers first. Okay, but don't forget that it took 4 10s on the top and 1 10s for 8.1. Here we go. Let's multiply 23 times 81. Same thing. One group of 3 is 3. One group of 2 is 2. Now, for those who haven't been really good at multiplication, I just want to highlight at this point here. You see that 8? When you do 8 times 3, which we know is 24, some of us may take time there, but 8 times 3 is 24, you don't write the 4 here. Why don't you write the 4 and carry the 2 over here? Very good. Be careful. A lot of students put the 4 in the units column, but the 8 is in the tens column. So that's why when you say 8 groups of 3, it should be 24 starting in the tens column. Therefore, the 4 should be over here. Okay, so you're saying 8 times 3 is 24, but remember this is 24 tens. That's why you write the 4 tens goes here, and that 2 goes into the hundreds column. That's why. Okay, that's why that happens. So you carry the 2 into the next one, and so now 8 times the 2, 8 times the 2 is 16 with an extra 2 values of that, 2 of the hundreds or 2 of those tens. Now make it 8 times 2 is 16, 16 add 2 is 18. So be careful there, okay? Be careful that if you start on an 8, it has to be in the tens column. It has to be in the tens column. Don't start at the units column, otherwise your answer's wrong. So, now, where'd it go? Oh, here. Once you got it in the correct columns, now we can say, okay, I've done 8 times 3, 8 times 2. Let's sum them together. How many units, how many tens, how many hundreds, and how many thousands do we have? I still have 3 units. 2 plus 4, this is 8 tens. This is 8 of the hundreds, and then I've got 1 of the thousands. Okay? What was that? Did I miss something? 8 times 3 is 24. 4 carry the 2. Oh, thank you. You're correct. Silly Mr. Tran. Now, remember that's not your final answer because we made our lives easier by doing 23 times 81. The first step was you did times it by 1,000, 10,000, and then you times it by 10. So when you want to go backwards, you have to make sure to divide now. Thank you. I'm assuming you're going to be taking notes to ask me questions later. Thank you, Jake. So if you did times 10,000 and then times by 10 to make it whole numbers, now you have to move everything back. You have to divide it all by 10,000 and then also divide by 10 again. So how many groups of 10 are there? Count the number zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is what I wrote up here. There was 4 and 1 there. Together it's 5 places you're moving back. So here we go. We're going to move back 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is where the decimal point should end up with. And my answer for it is therefore equal to point. What do you put in the space that's empty there? You put a 0. So it's 0, 1, 8, 6, 3. Make sure to put a point before. Okay, so that's how you do decimals. The one with the decimals, you have to count number of times to change it. And this is going to be different to division. Be very different to division. Okay? We'll do one example of division and then I'll give you that time to work on the examples. But please copy down this example because I know a lot of students struggle with this one. Please copy it down. Please copy it down. Please copy it down. Because a lot of students struggle with this and they zone out and they lose marks on something they should be able to do. Copy it down. That one, right there. E.
There's two sides. Oh, okay.
No, it's part of the calculation. Copy it down. Copy it down.
What? What do you want?
Maybe you can watch the video again.
Wait, what do we copy down? The 1,000.
The one I just did. Is question, method, answer. Copy the example down. So I've done the example. This is 6E. Question 6E. That was 6E that I did. The exercise is 3E. We did 3D on Monday. Well, you're going to have to watch the videos for that. And I can come around and help you, AJ. Make sure to copy